Okay, we are reconvening another session here in Lecture Hall 101 of the Apartment Academy, the multifamily industry's only operations-focused podcast and your institute of higher NOI. I'm your host, the Dean of the Apartment Academy, Daniel Cunningham. And today's guest lecturer is Blerim Zeqiri. He is CEO and co-founder of Radix. If you're not using Radix already and you are in the acquisitions field in multifamily, you are missing out, and you are going to probably immediately navigate to their website at the end of today's podcast, because the data that Radix is providing in order to make smart investing and operating decisions is revolutionary. It's things we've been waiting years for in the industry to see come to pass. So a very interesting interview. Let's bring him on. Okay, Professor Zeqiri, welcome to the campus here of the esteemed Apartment Academy. Good to have you.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, Daniel.
I always like to start off hearing a little bit about the journey that brings folks into this business. Seems like I think we're 0 for 68 people that actually intended to get into multifamily as a career. But although you're on the tech side now, you were on the operations side, which is always very interesting to hear people creating solutions that they struggled with on the operations side. So tell us a little bit about that journey, how you came to start Radix.
Well, when I was a kid, I always dreamed about being in multifamily. No, I'm joking. I wanted to break your streak of 68 to 0. But the truth is, in college, I love finance. I wanted to be investment banking. By happenstance, I got an internship with a small company at that time called Alliance Residential. I joined them over the summer. I loved the people that I was working with. I loved the industry. I loved underwriting deals. And I ended up essentially working full time when I was in college. And then when I graduated, I turned down an investment banking job and joined Alliance full time in acquisitions. Essentially chasing deals across the country, underwriting deals, looking for deals. And then after 2 years of doing acquisitions, underwriting, I ended up in asset management exactly at the wrong time in 2008, 9, and 10 when the great financial crisis happened. So I spent a lot of hours working through our properties, making sure that we had enough in debt service coverage ratios, that we could actually manage those assets and not have to give them back to the bank. Operations were a struggle, as you can imagine. Rents were down substantially. After asset management, I moved to revenue management and research. So I ran revenue management for all Alliance deals, and I was in charge of all the research, compiling all the different research resources, negotiating different contracts. Then before I left, I was back in acquisition doing deals across the country. So I had a journey of just shy of 11 years with Alliance, and I grew as the company grew. Alliance went from being very small, about 15,000 units, to roughly 150 when I left, and being the third largest operator, or the fourth largest operator in the country. Still is one of the largest developers in the country. So it was a great journey. I learned a ton, and I learned everything I know about the industry during that 10, 11-year time span.
We share a common pedigree there in that just slightly before your stint as an asset manager, I was director of asset management for Aimco. So doing the same sorts of things as an asset manager that you were paying attention to. But somewhere along the way, either on the asset management side or the acquisition side, you were looking for data of some sort that you wanted to understand better. What was that, and what was the problem in getting at that data?
That's very true. When you're making decisions, a lot of times, in our industry especially, you're making decisions with very faulty data that is very anachronistic, delayed. There's massive latency. Most of the data providers, the latency was 2, 3, 4 months, depending on which one you're using. And then the way that data is collected is it's a sample type data. And so when you're making a decision, generally speaking, you're making a decision at a property level. Whether you're looking to buy or acquire a property, or whether you're looking to develop a property or renovate a property from an asset management standpoint, as you know very well, when you're deciding, okay, is this property worth renovating, and who would I be competing against if I renovate it? And so This type of data was impossible to come by. And I found myself making massive decisions, not just me, but everyone in our company and our peers, making decisions with data that was collected 3-4 months ago on 50 properties in a market that has, 500,000 units.
Let me interrupt you for a moment if I can. What kind of data are you talking about? You're talking about rental rate data, amenity data. What is the basket of things you were seeking to make decisions?
Thanks for asking that clarifying question, because it's important, obviously, what data. Mainly here I'm referring to operating data, such as rents, concessions, traffic, leases, occupancy, lease percentage, exposure, ATR, and then also specific data for that property, such as amenities, common amenities, interior amenities, location amenities. And then there are a lot of other data, for instance, that are, most of this data is semi-public, public, but you also have a lot of data that is being compiled by other third parties, such as Google ratings or Yelp ratings or things of that nature, that really do impact property operations. So broadly speaking, operating type data. What school district is this property located? Because it makes a huge difference. What type of walk scores does this property have? What other properties around it are? If you don't know that there are 3 bedrooms in that submarket, or there's an abundance of 3 bedrooms, for instance, in a market that is not conducive for families, it's going to impact your underwriting. It's going to impact how you operate that property. It's going to impact who is the targeted demographic is for that property. So is that type of data, broadly speaking.
Yeah, these are the sort of things that I remember with the acquisitions team over at Aimco that we were like, almost impossible to really understand. You needed boots on the ground to give you this data. Otherwise, you were making acquisition decisions that you felt almost blind. But if you knew some of this stuff, you felt like you had the pricing flexibility to maybe outbid people that didn't know, that had a great walk score, or that there was just nothing else in the area that could compete. So it was really hard back then. This is, late 90s.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I saw so many cases where an investor, for instance, would either underprice or overprice a property just because they didn't really understand that submarket. They didn't understand what's happening around it. Now, you might be in an up-and-coming submarket, for instance, that has a lot of potential, but if you don't have the data to show you where that submarket is going, where those properties are going, you're going to underestimate just how valuable that property is or where things are going. So in other words, you're constantly looking at leading indicators to see where things are going, not necessarily where things are at. So like you, I used to, one of my important things that I did every time I would get into best and final to acquire property is tour that property, tour all the properties around it, and make sure that I understood who would be living there. You have to understand who would be living there in order to really understand what's that property worth. Is it worth a lot, or is it not worth a whole lot? And that's just one component of it when you're seeing with your own eyes. But then where things are going, that's where you need a lot of data.
Okay, so you were struggling. Data was old. What did you do about it? I see from your shirt, I know what you did about it, but let's get there.
Yeah, so I did what most of us would do when we were on the operating or investment side of the business. I called every tech provider, every data provider, and I asked for better data. I said, the way this data is being collected, the way this data is being collated, indexed, and essentially displayed is not very action driven. It's not very it's not leading us to make the right decision. So what can you do about it? And I even shared some of the ideas that I had. No one really had any interest in pursuing that. So I quit Alliance, started Radix. In between, I had a stint with a private equity group out of New York, doing acquisitions for single family rentals as we were growing Radix on the side. But in about 12 months after I quit Alliance, we had a beta version. We had an MVP product, and then we started going to prospective clients. I understood the problem. I understood what the solution it needed to be, and our main solution was creating a networking effect in an ecosystem where the data comes from properties, so that you know exactly what's happening in your submarket and market, and this data is actionable, is accurate, is fast, daily, weekly data, so that you're looking to make the smartest decision for your property. Um, Whether that's from an investment standpoint or exit strategy or asset management, whether you need to renovate it or not, do you need to push rents or pull back and push occupancy? What's happening to your traffic? So those were the type of actionable data and leading indicators that would help you manage your portfolio better.
All of you gave us a laundry list earlier of things that you were seeking when you were in acquisitions. Are all of those in the Radix basket now? All of those data points?
Correct. Yes, we have probably the best data in the industry, especially when it comes to some of the leading indicators that no one else is even tracking. And those leading indicators, to give you an example, Daniel, when the pandemic started and shutdowns kind of were implemented across multiple different cities and then eventually across the whole country, we could see trends emerging as a city was shut down. As an example, let's just use Dallas, for instance, shuts down. You see leading indicators, traffic, leases going down, then occupancy, lease percentage, and eventually concessions are introduced in that market, rents started going down. And then the city would open up back up again, and you'd see those leading indicators going up, and eventually rents would stabilize. So it's like an accordion effect where you would see, and we got very good at actually forecasting where things are going in any given market. So those leading indicators really enable you to see in advance of what's happening in your market.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. Let's take traffic for a moment. It seems to me as an outsider, I don't even know where you begin to go to get that data. How do you get traffic data in a market? Where does that come from? How do we know? How did your clients know that that's reliable?
So traffic is interesting because when we first started, and we reached out to 10 of our largest clients to say, hey, here's what we're thinking of traffic and our definition of traffic. What is your definition? So from 10 clients, we got 11 different definitions of what traffic was, and I'm not even making it up. Because as you know, the industry didn't have common definitions of what traffic is. Is it a tour? Is it a show? Is it an online inquiry? All those are different definitions of traffic, so we came up with the standardization. So part of what we do is we also standardize the data, saying here's what we're going to define as traffic. And so this data primarily comes from our direct integrations with properties, but we also have a proprietary tool called Survey Swap where our users are contributing data and sharing this data, and we explain what these definitions are. Again, traffic, no one hides what their traffic is per se. It's just people walking into a property and wanting to tour an apartment. But it's very helpful to the industry to understand what are the genesis of demand. Is the demand going up or is it going down? And that enables, again, an operator to really be proactive about it.
And how many users do you have there to contribute to this data pool?
Roughly 8.5 million units right now.
8.5 million units. That your clients represent 8.5 million units. Yes, got it. And we use my Aimco days as an example. So if I was a user of the software when I was at Aimco, we represented, I don't know, we had 150,000 units, I think, at the time. So we represent 150,000 users, but maybe there's 3 people on the acquisitions team that submit data, or would it be something that all of our properties were submitting data to you individually?
It's all the properties because we really count everything at unit level, down to units. So if a property has 300 units, the data is on that property and those 300 units, down to a unit type level, essentially.
Cool. So are you my market survey now? Like, are the days of knocking on doors or calling your buddy at the property down the street to ask what rental rates are those over?
I would say yes. And in many markets, our users will tell their peers saying, hey, we're using Radix. Why are you still calling me and wasting my time? As you know, where the industry is going is becoming more centralized. Costs are going rapidly up. It's hard to find labor that is working at properties for a long time. So there's a massive turnover. All our clients are complaining about that. And we bring efficiencies to have better insights, better data, therefore better decision making, without really going through the brain damage of trying to collect this data manually. It's like, as you know, calling each other on Mondays and trying to cajole each other to share some of this data. So we would know what's going on. So yes, market surveys over, and that enables our clients really to think far more differently. Now you're thinking about what that data represents as opposed to spending the time to gather this data. These efficiencies enable properties to run more effectively, more efficiently, and therefore hopefully translates also into how they run those properties, providing better services, better rents. And consumers should benefit from it as well, just because those efficiencies are passed down. As you know, if something costs more, if you have to have a person spending half of their week collecting data, then you're going to pass that cost to consumers as well.
If you can expand on that a little bit, I think the use case for acquisitions is obvious. I'm sure this is a must-have tool for anybody who's serious about multifamily, institutional class multifamily acquisitions.
Or development, I would say, for that matter, frankly.
Choosing development locations.
That's right. That's right.
And perhaps even amenitizing, like what are the market amenities? That's pretty cool. Are there you were sort of hinting at operational insights that people use Radix. How might this data be used in ways that are not so obvious?
Okay, so a couple of not so obvious ways. Asset management, your old role and my old role, right? You're constantly looking at, well, what should we do with this portfolio? What should we do in this market? Should we stay in? Should we exit? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is this a market that we as a company want to be in? And what that looks like. Every company has strategic priorities. You've got cost of equity, cost of debt, all those different things. Do you have enough properties in that market and sub-market to even drive operating efficiencies? So as asset managers, we're always interested in understanding a little bit more mid and long term where things are going. Should we renovate this property? If we renovate it, what type of renovation? Should we upgrade our amenities? What that looks like? Because if you spend 10, 15 grand a door renovating a property, but you essentially upgrade it to the wrong spec because the demographics, the market doesn't support what you just spent those dollars on, you might find yourself in having spent all those dollars and trying to increase rents but your ROI is just simply not there. Your return on investment is simply not there. I cannot tell you how many times, for instance, I would say, hey, our underwriting called for spending this much in dollars per unit and getting this type of return. And if the return was $100 more, they're like, oh yeah, we're getting that return. But then when you look at it, the bases have just decreased by $100. So the premium is still there, but your basis just decreased by $100. So in essence, you're not really benefiting from that expenditure at all. You're not benefiting from your investment.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about, if you can or willing to, what a service like this costs.
So we launched with our first platform, which was Benchmark. Benchmark.
When was that, by the way? When did you guys launch originally?
2016.
Okay.
Launched 2016. Benchmark is what you'd call market surveys in the past. You're benchmarking yourself against peers, sub-market, market, what's happening in your market. That has been our bread and butter. And then we launched two additional platforms. One, Proforma. Proforma is used exactly what you and I discussed from an acquisition standpoint, development standpoint. But another use case, for instance, that some of our clients use is when they're going and pitching third-party services as well. Say you're an equity investor, you don't manage for yourself, you put an RFP out there and you're asking everyone to come in and submit for their management services. They'll use our platform to underwrite that deal just as if you were underwriting for the first time when you're building it or buying it. So that's another use case. And then the third one is research. So we've been able to combine these 8 million units of daily and weekly data into sub-market and market, and we bring outside data as well, whether it's Bureau of Labor Statistics, Census Bureau data, or other open source data. Like I mentioned earlier, walk scores, traffic scores, bike scores, things of that nature. And we combine all of this together to kind of give our users an insight. For instance, we have a proprietary data metric called share of wallet. Essentially, it just takes the median income of that area and median rent and tells you how much on average, or the median dollars that a resident is spending to be in that area. So you're spending 33% of your income on rent, or you're spending 20%. That also tells you just how affordable that market is. So those are some of the types of things that our research platform, now we've combined it all together into one. And it depends on the subscription, depending on where the client is. I'd say anywhere between 70 cents to $1, $20, $30, depending on what you subscribe. So in the grand scheme of things, we're actually very affordable, and that has been by design, because we want to make the industry more effective. We wanted to make the industry more efficient, and reach adoption much faster than some other groups.
Amazing. What's next on the horizon? By the way, that's I'm just thinking about the cost of that. I mean, that sounds super affordable for somebody that's their profession. Is actually, it sounds like a no brainer. What's on the horizon? Like, what are you guys up to that you're willing to share?
So our goal is really just like a lot of different industries. How do we enable our clients not just, hey, here's what has happened or here's what's happening? As you know, our industry sometimes has a tough time even understanding what is happening. Our goal is, how do we get into predictive and then prescriptive? Hey, here's where the market is going. Here's where, as you've seen in our industry, for instance, Fed decides to raise rates rapidly. It impacts our industry massively and very quickly. Within a year, the entire environment has changed. So what does that mean for our clients? What does that mean for the development side or acquisition side? This has stalled, obviously. Transactions are probably down 80% year over year, somewhere in that range. And so our goal is, within our platforms, building in the tools and metrics that enable predictive and prescriptive. We foresee this happening, and our recommendation is X, Y, and Z to our clients. That is because when you have large volumes of data, it becomes super effective and very interesting on what you can do with it. I often use the comparison, or rather the aspirational. We want to build the Bloomberg trading terminal for multifamily, is what I tell our team, and that's just one way of kind of describing what we want to do and where we want to go. In other words, bring in all sorts of different data to enable you as a user to see what's happening around you.
Blair, you have pulled back the covers of the institutional investors across this country who used to have their little hordes of data that helped them find the investment opportunities, and now you've sort of made it egalitarian. Anybody with your data could find submarkets that are ripe for investing and make much better decisions than they could before. It's stunning.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. The truth is that more accurate data, disambiguous data, helps everyone. Can you imagine if you were trying to stay someplace at a hotel and you had to drive around asking what's the price to stay for a night, or if you didn't know what airline ticket is going to cost you from San Diego to Dallas? It's crazy. We cannot imagine the world without those at our disposal type of transactional data. And that has benefited, obviously, everyone. When you don't have the right type of data, you're going to make a wrong decision. It seems so intuitive, but it's hard to kind of describe it, just how much our industry took time to understand it. If you don't have the data, you constantly are going to miss what's happening. You're going to overprice when you shouldn't, and you underprice when you shouldn't. And when you have absorption problems, you're going to keep rents high. It doesn't benefit anyone, including that operator or consumers, or you keep it too low when the market is rapidly moving in a different direction. So this type of data and information should make everyone more effective, more efficient. Ambiguous data, while it might seem competitive at first glance, it really isn't, because you don't know what's happening around you. They might not know what you're doing, but you don't know what everyone else around you is doing either. So it's not competitive.
Yeah. Interesting. Although I would love to just do this all day and make a living from it, this is not my day job. As you know, I'm CEO of Leonardo 24/7, and at Leo we have a separate due diligence tool for acquisitions that people use to do their unit by unit inspections and their lease file audits. And similar kind of story in that, it used to be very difficult once you got into due diligence, like it just took a lot of effort to look at the demographics of the people that live there and what their income ranges were, and do the calculation. You're talking about like how much are these people paying on average as a percent of their salary, and I have heard, from clients what a godsend it is to be able to just do those inspections and immediately get those kinds of results.
I can give you a first-hand experience. I was involved when I first joined Alliance. We acquired a 15 property portfolio across the Southwest. It was 15 properties, give or take 4,000 units, you can imagine. And we had to walk every unit as part of our due diligence. And we would give literally a spreadsheet that was printed with X's where people had to go in and walk every unit. What does it have? What doesn't? And they would handwrite stuff, walking every unit with just a notebook pad, and then bring it all back, give it to the analyst who had to try to read someone's handwriting and try to make sense of someone who's walking and writing. It would take 2 to 3 weeks to compile all of this just to understand what does this property have. It's crazy when you think about it. So what you guys are doing, the innovation you have, I wish I had it, because then you can, within hours I would imagine, or days, you can see what did I just tour? What is this property all about? Which in and of itself makes you more effective.
Seconds, actually. Once all they're done, you run the reports. It's pretty, yeah.
And that's in my lifetime. And I'm not 100.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, this is all, well, 2016, that's sort of when the very first notion of like the due diligence inspections moving from paper, that's when that started to happen now. And, we have somewhere around, I think 22% of all the acquisitions in 2022 went through our software platform for the inspections. That doesn't mean that 80% of people doing it on paper, but it does imply we're still not there. Like there's still a lot of people doing it that way, and probably a lot of people not using your data to make buying decisions, and probably making poor investments as a result. So if people want to get in touch with you, find out more about the company, what's your preferred method?
Our website is probably the best, radix.com, or email info@radix, or anyone can email me directly, blerim@radix.com. It's probably the easiest. We obviously love feedback. We're very open. Our clients constantly send us feedback. That's what enables us to continuously improve our platforms. If one client has an issue, we know that others have the same issue. But as you know, in our industry, people are not very vocal about issues that they encounter. So our goal is constantly to try to solicit feedback and what we can do better, what we can improve, whether from a product or our services with our clients.
Great. Well, certainly game-changing from my perspective. Congratulations. Wonderful insight, great company. You guys are doing very well. So thank you for sharing some of the of this information today. I'm sure you opened a lot of people's eyes if they weren't aware of your company already.
Thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you.
Yes. Take care. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us at this week's episode of the Apartment Academy podcast. The Apartment Academy is a production of Leonardo 24/7, the industry's leader in multifamily operations and maintenance software. At Apartment Academy, we realize the hard work that goes into property management and the stress that comes along with it. Leonardo 24/7 takes the guesswork out of your team's day-to-day by providing customized daily guidance on tasks that need to be done, guaranteeing consistent operations across your entire portfolio. To learn more, visit www.leonardo247.com today.